One little announcement. For all those people waiting for membership cards, they're being printed up and they'll be here very soon in the mail. What else? There's another poetry reading coming up on the 9th. I'll announce this again later because I'm one of the guys that's going to read. Anyway, it's going to be at the recital hall at City College at 7 o'clock. What's that again now? Thursday on the 9th, 7 o'clock, Theater Arts Building, recital hall. Okay. One other announcement is, if there's anybody here wanting to participate in the Poets in the Schools program, either as a teacher bringing poets into the schools or someone that may be interested in getting involved in the Poetry in the Schools program, get hold of me afterwards. We're trying to get something going with the schools, high school, grammar school. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Tonight, we've got two poets we're going to read, David R.C. Good and Betty Jean Holmes, and then later on Glenn Delphin is going to come on. We say for a few minutes here. Okay. Betty Jean is the winner of the Academy of American Poets Award. She received the Common Wages Poetry Award and is currently an English major at CSUF. Philip Rabin once said that I was a poet of the unemployed working class. And I always considered that a great compliment. But I think I can pass that on to Betty Jean. Her poems are also gathering places for the unemployed working class. They're also gathering places for the colorfully stubborn and irrational. She seems to be able to take her writing through the raw elements of experience with a friendly, come-and-go emotional freedom that catches the swagger, sympathizes with humanity and its needs. She writes she writes in first person, and that being the axis, the focus, the reflection that takes place in externalized sketches of home, family, friends, neighborhood, society. They are sketches, but they have about them a kind of sure-footed sense of circumstances and social vision that goes beyond words. Her poems are also reunions. Holmes's poems are imaginative, spontaneous, inventive, intriguing. They delight in a kind of personal energy that seems to animate objects, giving sparkle that lights the imagination. Another thing I like about her poems is the romanticism that as a galvanizing agent that will give an enduring quality to her poetry. One thing I've noticed in my own creative frustration is that our minorities, being trapped and pressured by mainstream affluent white America, are the places where we find the new forms of courage and human integrity. Whether it's music, literature, revolutionary politics, morality, fashion, traditional mainstream America is a monument to vanity and inertia. Even its new media has become anemic, even though I sit mesmerized by the TV. I've noticed its composed, revised innuendos are out of touch. What I want to hear about is people sharing those things pertinent to their lives. I've learned nothing about courage and integrity from the Bible, the Constitution, or any of the presidents in my life. And nor have they given me a perspective on my emotional problems. What I've learned through what is pertinent in mine and others' lives, usually in a place not too far from the void. I think Betty Jean Holmes' poetry is very inspiring in that regard and in many regards. Would you like to come up and read, please? I'm proud to present Betty Jean Holmes.
Thank you, Chuck, for that Academy Award. I just want to say, I grew up in a small community about 35 miles from here, and the community is called Lanier. And the people in this community, it seems like everybody knew each other. They knew each other's business. It was sort of like home for everybody. And plus, where I lived at, it was sort of like the center of that community. It was like we lived by the railroad tracks. There was a bar across the street, 2 churches, and it was like the environment where I grew up around was like really sort of like a city, but really was in the country. Also, I would like to say that my parents, they worked, but it was sort of I wouldn't say it was a 9-to-5 job or upper class type of job that they did. But anyway, the work that they did, it sort of, it was different than what most people did. And the environment sort of brought, I say most of us real close to the people in that community. Well, anyway, I'm going to start with a couple of poems. It talks about the hair. The first one is called 1963, and the second is Medusa. 1963. Saturday morning, I was sunk down in an army surplus chair. Smoke erupted from the kitchen burner. My mother gripped the naps on the edge of my hair. Oh, honey, did that hurt? The job had to be done. I was frozen. Fright displayed itself across my face. Although this had been happening to me for a decade, I never immune to it. The sizzling sound of pure lard spread volcanically behind my ears. Unconsciously, my mother snagged and scalded my scalp, branded like a calf. The mowing of the hot black iron continued until every strand was straight. Shifting and shuffling, I looked out the window. Friends kicked up dust, shooting 10-cent marbles, playing horsey on a thrown-away broomstick. Finally, I stood on the front porch, fumbling with my curls. Ray Roberts glared, and Mary Mouse flundered at my mother's creation. Medusa. Twisting and tugging, wrapping and knotting, the pattern of snakes behind my neck. African culture. 10 hours of posture, tug of war. 4 months of relief. Apricot shine, fully woven. It seems like at the age of 9 to 14, it seems like those were the good old times. It seemed like that I didn't have any kind of worry or worries. I didn't have worries or problems. It just seemed like those were just good memories, just good times. And there's about 4 poems that I would like to read that's concerning when I used to go fishing with my father, when me and my sister got our first car, and it's just, and about when we used to go to school. The first one is called Morning. We stood beside the street. Cold slapped our faces. Coughs and puffs, smoke like signals, breathing in and out. We clapped our feet against the ground to keep away the numbness. A holler, "Hi y'all," from down the road. We couldn't make it out, only could imagine gray eyes or po-boy. Whispering cars could be heard, but barely seen until they turtled closer. As we looked out, the sun was like the moon, and our house just 200 feet away was out of sight. Even with gloves and coats, we felt bare. I wrapped my sister, Linda, in my arms, squeezing tight and grabbing at our jackets. How we wished for that bright orange bus. I remember on a visit in Oakland at the age of 9, dizzy from roller coasting through the streets in a 1955 Blue Jay Buick. We passed a rundown juke joint, 5 black dudes with smashed naturals, shiny black leather jackets, and tilted dark hats loafing out in front. As we cruised by, I looked through the side mirror. The guys stretched forth their big fists, punching at the sun, and their heads were hanging down. Blue in 1969. It was like new. River-colored blue-green 1964 Ford. The smell of fresh, milky beige leather bumped our noses. My sister and I just got our license, and it belonged to us. Any other night, Father walked across the railroad tracks to Fred's bar, but he drove blue this time. About 2 a.m., he staggered into the house, loaded, knocking over chairs, banging walls and peeing up against the piano. Later that morning, the inside of Blue had a look of hung, smutted smoke curtains, wired spring seats that were later replaced by slop buckets and cans to sit on, because Blue could still be driven, but it was too much to handle on the streets. The fault of a short circuit, we were told, but we knew better, because we found Father's Lucky Strike cigarettes halfway burned up on the inside. This next poem I'm going to read is called Almost Mud Dry. And to me, this poem is really down to earth. And the reason I said that is because we used to eat dirt, and my mom, when she would get pregnant, we had to make sure we brought her some dirt back. Almost Mud Dry. We couldn't get out of the house fast enough without Mother raving and craving us about not forgetting to bring some homemade watered dirt back to settle her yawning, poked out belly. And our minds didn't cease until a bucket full was packed and stuffed in the trunk. With our every step, dried frogs and scorched baby-like crabs crackled and splattered the earth. And those were the ones that made it to shore. We couldn't eat them because they were already gone, and we needed them alive. Pulling and shuffling started a rampage. Those good old red stickered sharp crawdads were the first thing we spotted out. And then the bluegills, crappies, tangerine perch, and moon-eyed catfish were next. Belly flaps, splashes of scaly carp, like goldfish, silvered the air as they clashed against the sunbeams, which we mud-dragged a halfway ragged net through troubled weeds, bushes, rocks, bottles, and tumbled in mud sand in rubber slick irrigating boots that trailed up our knees. We fish-napped and fostered without consideration, thrashing and scraping the whole bear. Tubs full and croaker sacks, chattering about a good old fish fry that lurked our eyes onward at the sounds of cars passing. House of Joy. We lived next door to the hottest house in town. Cutthroats, crap players, snuff dippers, and smokers of tobacco raided this one-room shack. Brewed corn liquor whiskeyed their minds with insane moves of pivoting and bobbing, rocking and twisting up a hot mist of sweat. Jive cats like Big Daddy paraded the women around the room in pinstripe zoot suits and polished alligator shoes with slick black hair that laid back or parted to the side. And rouge-painted women decked out in bright apple red and peachy orange chandelier dresses that dangled at every move. And their spiked heels and ponytails helped set the pace even that much faster. Logan, known as Dark Gable, slipped, slided, and skated over tables, ending it with a split. He and Lula were the best dancers in the San Joaquin Valley, according to them. And Bess Ann was the hostess, with her flashy rings, necklaces of crystal and spark, glittery gold and silver teeth that made me kneel and almost foam at the mouth. She always did take a liking to me. After jamming for 20 years, the sound of the jukebox, fumes of Miss Mary's barbecue ribs and chicken still stick in my mind. But the House of Joy rocked to a new sound of tamarines, organs, and fast songs that erupted hollering and shouting and holy rolling to glory, unlatching feathered hats, turbans, and unpinned wigs that sweep the floor. The choir rolled with cream white shirts and dark skirts, flapped hands, stomped, danced, cried out toward the kingdom, and on the deacon's board, ex-joint members like Thunderbird, a natural-born sipper, served the wine and bread on the Lord's Day, while 6 and 8, a well-known dicer, badgered the sisters and brothers to give more money. No boyfriends or minis at the knees. No short sleeves or makeup to the face. That was the rule. So soul saving and baptism took its course, and my mom, Lula, danced to a different step when she was cleansed. Okay, by the tree that still stands at our house. C. Bonner wore a brown brim hat, and underneath was slick, cold black hair. He was nearly 7 foot, big boned, and light brown complected skin. He carried with him a diamond-tipped ebony cane under his right arm and talked about his scars and tattoos as souvenirs. He was married with 7 kids and a gambler in more than one way. His roars, cusses, and threats petrified men as well as women, and none of his fistfights ever matched even. He was a womanizer, flirt, and bully. Another man's woman didn't matter. He'd break them up if he chose to. Junior Bell stood in the doorway of the gambling shack. His rifle shouted. Bonner struck in the back. fell inside his open car door, and Bill shot again, this time in the head. Only 5 years in the slammer over his gal. He told Lua that the nightmares still come. The car by the tree, blood on Bonner's face, people scattered. The next two poems I'm going to read. First one is called Hard Times, and the next one, the other one is called County Trip. And these two poems about, my mom tended to have a lot of sick kids, and not necessarily mental, but physical. And so that's what these two poems are about. Hard Times. He wasn't the oldest son, but he had father's name and features. Like a grasshopper, he had long, puny arms and legs. You could see his veins poking out from underneath his skin. He had the brownish, bright, moon-like eyes that looked gray at times. And he almost was a water baby because of his oddly oval-shaped head. At 6, a high fever broke out. Mother bathed him in Epsom salt and ice cubes. She wrestled with it for 2 nights straight until it came down, but the damage remained. We followed him from one sane asylum to the next. He was in them more than out. There were slams of bars and rattling keys by the guards. They had cold looks and rough answers while they checked our IDs and visiting papers. And they made us feel like we were the criminals. County Trip. Curtis's attacks of asthma carried us there. He wheezed like crazy, gasping for breath with dilating eyes. Mom paced the floor nervously wrecked, pampering his fever with 7-Up, chicken noodle, and ice cube, while the old man warmed up the Studebaker, which most of the time they didn't know if it would crank or not. It became a normal thing, pinching pennies from one month to the next. Gas took nearly all the welfare check, and she had 6 others to think about too. 35 miles, and that was only one way. 2 to 3 days a week, sometimes every day. That toy waiting room would be kid-packed, hair uncombed, dirty faces, and most of us looked and dressed second-handed. Some crutched, patched, and deformed. And our area catered to conditions similar to Curtis's. Prescriptions of Morex legally hooked him as an addict and changed the color of his skin from a light yellow to almost pitch black. And the mother strapped down and folded arms so the physicians could punch a shot into their baby's behind. My closing poems are will be called, one is My Folks, and the other one is called I Can't See. My Folks. In the field 2 rows ahead of us, Garfield chopped and weeded cotton better than anyone we ever saw. He liked to do odds and ends around our house, and one day while Lulu was hanging clothes out on the line, he snuck through the back door and stuck his hands in her spaghettis. When she caught him, he said, "I just wanted a little of them Gettys. They sure is hot." Clyde used to come over, and Mother always riled him up to play the piano. We would just crack up at the way he pounded. One time our dad went into the kitchen and brought out the fly sprayer and sprayed black flag on him while he was yet banging on the keys. My favorite, Old Buzzard West, was bluish black and his eyes were white as the moon. He drove an old 1935 red pickup, which he'd park in our yard nearly every day. He used to eat my little sister's chicken by making her laugh while he growled at it. And our folks were puzzled at how Bobby, being only 4, was doing away with the meat after coming into the house for the 6th piece. Chicken Red was shamelessly po-faced. His clothes hung loose, and his bright orangey hair stood straight in the air. As we walked down the road, we watched him and his friends crowd in front of his shack. He baffled at the mouth about what he did years ago, and at the same time indulged in fifth after fifth of T.J. Walker and White Pope. And it never appeared he could care about what he was becoming. Almost every Saturday, Guy, Smoothmouth Brown, Snake, Snow, Big Bubble, and Big Tiny grouped out in front of the bar, talking loud, cussing, fighting, and shooting. And now, they all have moved on to a different place. And my dad, Gray Eyes, is with them too. I can't see. I can't see the tree that we swung from, the old butane tank beside it, and the trail of steps leading to the outhouse. I can't see the junkie pile in the yard by Father the Junk Man, the country bar across the street, and the old men that came over who jested, gossiped, and teased. I can't see them anymore. Thank you.
Sometimes I get carried away with my introduction. Poets are inspiring. Fun to write about them. God Almighty. Anyway, the next poet is David. I'll give him an introduction here. David, he got a BA in English from CSUF. He's the director of the PASS program, current editor, I believe poetry editor for Common Wages. He's presently working on an MA in creative writing, and he has published poems and fiction. And last year he won the fiction contest for Common Wages. His writing gets into and explores, for me, the feelings and emotional direction of our American aristocracy of pride and established traditions. Call it the suckling strain of small-town conservative standards and its redneck supposition. The conflict we have between the individual and society. He seems to have a sensitivity about how feelings are molded by agreements that have been taking place in our background or in the background of society, and the agreements we make or don't make with our outer consolidation. We have to have feelings, and we have to grow. Those feelings have to grow. We have emotions, and they are stirred and must be directed. We can't allow them to be stunted by miserliness of conservatism, damaged by gullibility, disowned by malice and distrust. We see reverence for authority become a kind of undermining rot. We see family matters worn out by narrowness, perception distorted by public opinion, morality becomes traction, the wired jaw of patience, the social infirmity, the coldness, the evangelical arson. We even get into the crashed bomber and broken machinery of attempted internationalism on the part of our fledgling government, which is more retarded than our partisan. He has taken his writing into the vein that supplies America with positives and negatives, into the strange agreements people make with themselves and how they're going to live their lives. What is the partisan fledgling to be proud of in our world of change, where there is an attrition rate to intellectual accuracy? There is a kind of trustfulness in David's writing. I guess a trustfulness necessary to protect feelings reflective search, as well as an even-temperedness directing the emotional power of his writing. His poems are usually soft-spoken approaches to the how-ness of how we can share our dreams, our lives, and there are beautiful things that come from the past that we can open to. Okay, get up here and start reading.
The other day, Friday, Betty and I got to read on KFCF, which was really a thrill. I couldn't see anybody. I can't see anybody now either. So but then KFCF made the paper because they, well, you know all about that. Because they broadcast Fresno County Board of Supervisors, and people supposedly listen to that because they want to find out what's going on in Fresno County. Well, I suggest that the supervisors get rid of KFCF, that they broadcast this every first Wednesday, and people will really find out what's going on in Fresno County. They can listen to Betty Holmes. And then they'll know where to spend their money. Okay. This first poem is for Yolanda, my wife. It's called Death Drop. Great romantic title. She always asked me, why don't you write love poems? And I said, this is a love poem. Okay, Death Drop. 15 hours in childbirth class was not enough to prepare me for this, nor was our 16 hours of your labor or the night's first 5 years of lost sleep and instinct worry. 10 years now, parents, and our daughter hangs by her knees from the avocado green gym set, taunting gravity, arms in pendulum motion, face aglow. Watch me do the death drop, Dad, she beams, as spindly brown legs flail space, her hair a yellow nest inverted. Then her tennies thud the ground, and she gives a calming laugh. Whoa, she says, that made me dizzy. I wanted to read a couple of short stories too. And they are real short for stories, I mean, as opposed to poems, but anyway. I've written a collection that I call Hub. Ironically, I guess Hub is real close to Lanier, where Betty grew up. I didn't grow up in Hub, but I always liked the name. It had a nice ring to it, Hub. Kind of like getting a board or something. But anyway, I grew up in Hanford, which also starts with an H, and it's real close by. So that's why this stuff is fiction, you see? So that's the answer. Okay. This one is called Dusters, which is sort of an introduction to the collection. The highway out of Hub is 2 lanes, straight and flat. To the east, the crops fan out until they smudge into the low haze of the sky. The farms have names like the Broken Bit, the Rugged Oaks, and Rancho de los Pobres, and the crops, mostly cotton, corn, and alfalfa, rotate with the seasons. A few hundred feet to the south, parallel to the road, lies an unpaved crop duster runway, and beyond that, distant oaks appear as they often do in local paintings, surreal, stuck in for effect. To the west, the highway cuts through an organized forest of walnut trees. They are lordly and their green is intense. The ones nearest the town were planted 90 years ago. Now the elephant-gray trunks, devoid of lower leaves, see summer light only in speckled shards that pierce the suffocating canopy of shade. Other than the highway, the only way out of Hub is to follow the dirt roads that border the fields and cross unmapped for miles. If a traveler stays with them long enough, eventually he will come to another highway that might lead to somewhere. Tom Hansen, the 31-year-old attendant at the Shell station, stood beside the pumps, looked to the east, and watched Barry Williams' bi-wing Stearman crop duster rise into the distance. He saw it bank to the left and heard the metallic roar of his engine ratcheting loud as an angry mosquito in close to his ear. Tom followed the plane's path, squinting as it reached the sun. He watched until the roar turned to a hum, and then the plane was gone and the fields were quiet again. When Hub is quiet, the ping of warming tin-roofed sheds carries for miles, and bored dogs bark across the fields for comfort. On the hottest days, grasshoppers the size of pocket knives crash through the brittle grasses to grill on the pavement. Tom drew a blue paper towel down his face, leaned against the yellow regular pump, and stared a long time after where the plane had gone, then pocketed the rag and skidded down to sit on the concrete base. His thoughts were on flight, and he tipped his cap over his eyes, envisioning the earth and what it must look like from an airplane. He conjured up a checkerboard of crops laid out like bricks. He saw the 27 houses, the school he'd gone to until the 8th grade, the Nazarene church, Wink's market and department store, the post office, the cooking pot, and himself, seated before the Shell station, looking up, squinting, his mouth tight. Suddenly he heard a cough, pulled up his cap, and someone was standing before him. Joaquin Miller was old and dark and lived a mile down the highway in a ramshackle pink trailer house. He walked past the gas station often, but always on the far side of the road. Tom had learned his name from the mailman, and he was surprised to see him up close. He had never seen such deep creases as those that pointed toward the old man's mouth, and his clear black eyes reminded Tom of slender arrowheads he'd kept as a kid. When Tom caught himself staring, he narrowed his own eyes and looked at the ground. "Well, what can I do for you?" he asked. "Cigarettes," the old man replied. Tom stood slowly, scratched at a drip of sweat that ran down his belly, and walked to the metal cubicle of the station that old man Gorman had trucked in after the war. The door and a half dozen windows had been replaced with plywood. Over the years, an air of modernism, intended in the mutton-barred glass and rounded corners, had become somehow comical. The yellow paint was badly peeled, and the room was stained with the sweltering odor of tobacco, sweat, and oil. "What kind do you want?" Tom asked, reaching behind the counter. "Winston's," Joaquin replied. "That'll be $1.25." The old man paid the exact amount and walked outside. Tom watched him move slowly across the gravel driveway. The sides of his shoes were torn loose from their soles, and he stepped gingerly on the broken rocks, as if he had no shoes at all. Tom glanced at the plastic alarm clock on the counter, then at the large green Dawson's implement thermometer that hung outside the window. It was 11:45 and already 98 degrees. "It's going to be a bitch," he thought. "Say, old man," he suddenly blurted out. The air was still in the way that only heat can silence it. Tom took off his cap and rubbed his dirty sleeve across his forehead. "It's going to be a bitch," he said, and he noticed how loud his voice was. The old man paused momentarily and looked back. Tom wondered what he must be thinking. That man had walked past the gas station nearly every day for 5 years, and they had never exchanged a word. Now all of a sudden, Tom found himself making talk. "Yeah," the old man said. Tom sensed that he wanted to leave, but he didn't for the moment. He only looked at Tom and said nothing. "Where you headed?" Tom finally asked, and moved out to slide down once more in the shade of the gas pump. The sun was nearly straight up, and the concrete base would soon be getting hot. "Post office," the old man said, and moved over to squat in the bit of shade the second pump provided. There he began to peel back the foil wrapper from the top of his new cigarette pack. Tom noticed how meticulous the old man was, folding the silvered paper out like a scoop. When he tapped out the brown filters, he took one for himself and offered one to Tom. Tom took the cigarette and lit them both with the match he'd struck on the ethic pump. "You know," he said, "I must have seen you walk past here 100 times, and I don't believe we ever spoke." Neither man looked at the other, staring instead at the wavering horizon of cotton, the intermittent splotches of oaks in the distance, and the wisps of dusters, frail, short-lived whirlwinds the heat kicked up. 1,000, the old man finally said. Tom sat reflectively pulling on a cigarette and scratching his ear. "I've passed here 1,000 times or more," the old man said, "and you ain't never said shit." Tom looked long down the highway. He could see the beginnings of a large yellow truck appearing far off by the rocking tea property. It was probably hauling alfalfa. It was proving to be a great year for alfalfa. Perfect weather, 6 or more cuttings. "So I've worked at this ratty-ass station on this highway now for 15 years. I see lots of folks travel by. I pump lots of gas, and I don't say shit to most of them." The hay truck was well in sight now. Its twin chrome stacks glinted in the burning sunlight. "How many you seen walking?" the old man asked suddenly, and the coming drone of the diesel grew louder. Tom reflected on that question. He knew the old man had it. They finished their cigarettes simultaneously, Tom mashing his under his boot heel, the old man squashing his between his thumb and forefinger, dropping the remains into his pocket. Suddenly the truck, a freightliner, flashed up and roared past as if it had skipped the last 200 yards. The driver blasted his horn and waved, was gone just as fast, and Tom scooped up a handful of gravel, letting the smallest grains trickle through his fingers. "Ain't you got mail to pick up?" he snapped suddenly. The hay truck was down near the crippled R now, his green bales quickly disappearing. The old man pulled himself up and headed off. Tom coughed a bit and spit to where a whirligig of wind whipped some blades of straw onto the highway. This is a poem that Chuck made some mention to of a B-52. I remember as a kid, and well, I either remember a dream or this really happened, and I'm not sure which, and I meant to ask somebody, but it sounded too stupid to not be sure which one it was, so it's true. Anyway, it's called October 22nd, 1962, 5:37 a.m. A B-52 scuds into a vineyard outside hub. Nearby families shriek awake. The roar dies out, metal cracks. Neighbors call the cops and stumble into brown air, dragging blankets, pants half hitched. "It isn't a bomb," the Rotary president hears himself scream. "It's a bomber!" And he can't help but notice the fresh spilled Cheerios popping off his undershirt like buttons. Suddenly his chest hurts, and he's sure he's acting silly, but children around him see only the wrinkled body of the fuselage as they shudder like the vine leaves in the wind. Then a pilot pops out a hatch to rise up and sit on the edge of the silver skin. His face is the color of soft yellow onions, and he vomits toward the crowd. "A lieutenant," he says, "inside, broken leg." And the Rotary president waves toward a stand of eucalyptus where sirens are whistling up the road. This next one is a short story, again, Hub. Two things when you work out in the fields on the west side. One of them is the heat, like in dusters. It's, you kind of remember the fog in the winter, but in the winter you still feel the heat that you had in the summer. I mean, it's that much, it goes on that much longer, but you all know that, right? And then out on the west side there's always the wind that never seems to stop. So in the first one I was dealing with the heat, and this one I'm dealing with the wind, among other things. At the end of the trees. "Oh, go on," Helen said. She was facing away from Dell, facing toward the old highway that curved out into view at the base of the Coast Range hills a half-mile away. Dell smiled. He watched her hair, the way it flowed in the wind. They were just at the end of the almond trees, and in the shade, her silhouette was cast perfectly against the shimmering yellow grass that ran to the California aqueduct, a large canal separating them from the distant road. "No, I mean it, Helen," Dell said. "Sometimes you remind me of a movie star, the way you carry yourself, like you did just now. Got out of the car and walked over here," he said. And he wanted her to smile, and he paused a moment, holding his breath. There on the rough-mowed grass between the rows of almond trees, brilliant chips of light broke through the leaves and scattered on the blanket where she sat. She didn't say anything, didn't glance at him, and Dell wondered if she might be counting the occasional cars that swept silently through the curve, the drone of their engines blown away. Upwind, a tractor was crawling back and forth. Dell couldn't see it through the trees, but he knew the steady sound of its chugging might have come from almost any distance. Sound carries so in the wind. "Helen," he said, and leaned back against rough bark. He had taken a sandwich from the plastic picnic basket she'd brought and held it out as if he were admiring a jewel or a fine work of art. "If there's one thing I've always said about you," he said, "it's that you sure make a fine sandwich." And he smiled at her. Helen still did not look at Dell, though, and because the wind had picked up a little in the trees, Dell couldn't hear if she had laughed. So he took in half the sandwich with one bite, smacked his lips loudly, and laughed a huffing sound through his nose. But Helen only seemed more intent on the highway. Dell had been pulling a mower through the trees since the first crack of light. He had left her in bed in the small farmhouse they rented a mile from Hub and walked out wondering if she was really asleep. He had only tossed around and kicked blankets all night. Then he had busied himself with his work all morning, staying on the mower without a break, stopping only once for fuel, and once to watch a covey of quail troop ahead of him. The line of 6 chicks behind the hen had reminded him of Saturday morning cartoons. "Helen," he said, wanting her to turn back, to look at him, not the cars out there moving away. "What's the matter, sugar?" he asked, and watched back the taste of bologna and mayonnaise with a swig of coffee from the thermos. Not warm, not cold. "Dell," Helen said and turned. Her eyes were covered by dark glasses, the kind movie stars wear at night. "You know what it is," she said, and her fine face seemed to hold no expression, no emotion. And Dell thought of the distant tractor droning out there in the breeze and how it was there, but he couldn't know how far away. Helen and Dell had been married 3 years. They met during their junior year in high school when Helen and her mother had moved to Hub. In their senior year, they had gone steady, and they had married the weekend after graduation. Dell knew they'd had some real fun times back then, though when he tries to remember it now, it seems they had only fought. The jealousy was all they had ever known. Dell had heard Helen explain much the same thing to her new friend, Alice the Amway lady, on the phone the week before. Before then, Dell hadn't thought a lot about their past or where they were going. "So Helen," he asked to the back of Helen's head, because she was facing the distance again, "what do you think we should do?" Yet even as he asked it, he wished that he hadn't. Not because he was afraid anymore of what she was going to say, but because he knew that they would argue all over again. But Helen said nothing. Dell heard only the faraway tractor and the wind. Then he looked down at the half-eaten sandwich in his hand and realized he had squished it clear through, and mayonnaise covered his fingers. He tossed the mush scrap of white dough aside and wiped his hand on his knee. Mockingbirds had come into the orchard somewhere nearby and begun to squawk. Dale heard their argument and wondered if he had screeched like that at Helen last night. She had certainly done it to him. God damn it, he almost said. But a lump like old bologna was wedged in his throat, and it seemed now there was nothing more to say. Dell, Helen finally said, and the sound of her voice allowed him to swallow. Dell, she said, and Dell figured she was trying not to cry again, like the words were stuck for her too. Last night, though, they had flowed. They had flowed from him, poured out like the wind, nothing but air, but knocking everything down. She'd said she was going to leave. She didn't want diapers and a dinky house. She wanted to go to beauty college or some stupid thing. Then she said he would never leave Hub because he was born there. But she was born in San Diego, and she could still remember things like movies and parks and buildings bigger than shacks and barns. Dell couldn't leave. She was right about that. And as he watched, she stood and looked out, her hand shading her sunglasses. He was watching her soft black hair that sparkled in the specks of light when she said his name again, only this time it was different. Dell, she said, look out there, and he did. Right before them on the distant highway, a Coca-Cola truck was rolling and twisting sideways, over and over into a huge cloud of smoke and dust. Jesus Christ, Dell said, and jumped up, his eyes so wide that the warm wind began to dry them out. Dell, Helen gasped, and stepped a ways ahead of him. What are we going to do, she asked, an edge of panic in her voice. We've got to do something, she said. That guy must be hurt. But Dell couldn't think of anything that would do any good. They were half a mile away, and a large canal lay between them and the wreck, so that even if they drove through the fields in Helen's car, they'd be stumped before they got there. Dell, Helen whispered, and turned to him, and streams of tears were flowing from her dark glasses. What are we going to do, she pleaded, and her voice was breathless, the way it was at the end of a bitter fight. I don't know, Dell said quietly as the wind began to pick up again, and he thought for a moment how the truck looked like a cartoon ladybug sprawled out on its back. Then a body wriggled through the window like a worm. There's nothing we can do, Dell heard himself say. They were 7 miles from the nearest phone, and suddenly he felt the way he had once when he'd seen a movie that ended wrong. Now Helen was finally looking at him, her back to the wreck, her face taut with fear, and her dark glasses reflecting his face, when over her shoulder he saw the truck explode into flames and a thick bubble of smoke trail away in the wind. Oh shit, Dell said, and the muscles in his face began to ache, and Helen turned and screamed. The crumpled red truck belched yellow flames and heaved black smoke. Fanned by the wind, it must have roared, but all that Dell could hear was the wind and Helen, who had started sobbing. Dell, she asked, almost pleading, aren't you going to do anything? And just as she said it, he saw a semi and 2 cars pull up to the wreck. The semi's driver, Dell could see, wore a bright yellow shirt and shot bursts of white gas from an extinguisher. He attacked the flames while people from the cars hovered around the Coca-Cola driver who was sitting at the edge of the road. There, see, Dell said, and he felt his face relax. It must be okay now. He got out. Nobody's running around. Gradually, other cars and trucks arrived. Fire trucks and such would be driving up soon. Dell and Helen stood a few more minutes, watching the scene being played out at the base of the hills. Well, Helen finally said, turning again to face Dell, I'm leaving. She sounded exhausted, and Dell nodded. Then Helen knelt down to pick up the blanket and the lunchbox, and Dell watched a small wad of saran wrap from his sandwich slip from her hand and tumble into the weeds. In the distance, the scene of the wreck had begun to look like the 5 o'clock news. Cars lined the old highway, and colorful lights flashed. Dell ambled back to his tractor and sat on a tire to smoke. He could no longer hear the tractor from upwind. The breeze wasn't as strong there in the trees, but he still had to cup his hand to get the match to stay lit. He took a deep breath of smoke and leaned against the radiator. Down the road, he could see Helen's orange Fiat moving away, and as for the wreck, he would see it again when he made his turn at the end of the trees. I'm going to read one poem and then one real short story. More. This one's called My Daughter's Lunch. 6 a.m., I rise to an oak floor, cold as tin, and chunks of tuna fish caught in globs of mayonnaise. The heater's hiss belies silence until the warming metal pops. Through the window, a vignette of frost, a fog curtain drifts, and the Keller's house sleeps, eyelids of shades drawn tight. This morning, the air is pungent with pickles, bread slumbers over the fridge, and lettuce chills my hand. I think of how the sun must try the black ridge of the Sierras, how the gray mist must not hold into March, how the bread must harden in the cupboard dark, and how my children must eat. I have dropped my knife and retrieve it, whistling a jingle about black olives. This last one is Paraguay at Christmas. If we, Tommy says, something about improving the tractor's horsepower, no doubt, but I have bumped up the accelerator, drowning out the words. I smile and tip my hat. I dump the clutch, and the yellow and green Johnny Popper lurches away. Tommy yells and flips me off. Like I said, I can't hear him, but it doesn't take a genius to read his lips. He's pissed. The rows out here are half a mile long, and I'm pulling a disc at about 2 mph. He ought to be cooled off good enough, I think, by the time I get back around to this end of the field. But when I look up from the line I'm trying to follow, he's gone. His pickup and a ball of dust are moving toward the horizon. At the end of the row sits a gray tin shed with Great Valley Farms spelled out and fading on the roof. The last time I did this field, I brought along some cans of spray paint in my toolbox. I have always been into art, see, and I kept getting really good ideas for going up and down the rows. The only trouble was I couldn't sketch them out and keep the disc on track, so I devised this plan. Every time I got to the east end of the field, I'd jump off my tractor and run over and paint a part on this picture on the west wall of the shed. It was great, see, because all the way up and back along the rows, I could study my work. And with spray paints, the pieces were big enough that I could see them and work out my next move. Then, when I got to the east end again, I'd know exactly what I was going to do. For example, a green, leafy-looking part might flower out at the end just perfect when I was standing up close. But from a quarter mile out, I might suddenly realize the thing came across as looking like a dick, which isn't exactly what I wanted. So all the way back in, I'd visualize a number of changes until I settled on one. Then, when I made it to the end of the row, I'd grab my green can, shoot it in real quick, and turn the tractor back out to the field. At first, I kept glancing at it as I headed away, but after the first 2 rows, I decided to make myself wait until I was heading back. That way, I cleared my head each time I drove to the west. Besides, the rows ended up straighter. I thought it was perfect. Each stroke sort of meditated on for a good hour or so before it was painted. Of course, once I had worked my way to the north a few rows, I had to make a break for my turnaround and drive down to the shed to get in the just perfect stroke. By the time the boss came out to get me, it was nearly dark. And besides, I had made it to the end of the field too far for him to see. You know, it's a funny thing about art. You work all day on it, and you think you've really got something. Then you go back later, and it just ain't the same. This piece was my interpretation of Paraguay at Christmas. At least that's what I called it when I was done. Of course, I've never been to Paraguay, or most anywhere else for that matter. But I like the sound of it. Paraguay at Christmas. It just sounds green and red. And it sounds clean, too. It sounds clean like jazz, like Latin jazz. Like marimbas, I guess, the way they sound like bells, only kind of feathery. Anyway, the next day, my friend Bill took me to see this art teacher I had heard about at Cooley Junior College. Bill said he was supposed to be real advanced. He had studied art in L.A. or something. He wasn't much help, though. He said if he ever got out toward Hub, That's the closest town to my painting. He would take a look, and that was that. So after I left his office, Bill took me over to see the teacher's classroom. And some paintings this guy had done were there. I told Bill they looked pretty good because he really liked the guy's work. The pictures were all of naked people, mostly fat, and the names were all numbers. Well, that's okay, of course, but it was while we were there that I realized Bill hadn't even seen what I had done. So now it's the end of summer, and I've been hired again. I came back all thrilled to see my painting, but it just wasn't the same. I'd been fired for it, of course, but I wasn't worried because I knew they would give me my job back sooner or later. They always do that on corporate farms. They change hands so often and pay us in cash that nobody knows anyone from one crop to the next. But anyway, my painting didn't look the same. Then when I got up close enough to see it good, I realized some jerk had painted right across the front of it, F-U in capital letters. I hoped it wasn't that art teacher. And I knew I shouldn't have left the used up cans that night. Well, now I'm plowing the same field again, just like I knew I'd be. I've been thinking, of course, and I'm making plans to color it in different this time to cover up the letters. I still like it though. And with a couple of cans of red, I think I can make it right. Thank you.